A lonely listening post floated on the far edge of Earth's system, its antennas stretching into the endless dark, catching whispers from stars and forgotten places. The post was manned by only a few operators, most of them young and bored. They expected nothing but routine signals, merchant transmissions, stray pings from old satellites, maybe the hum of a distant pulsar. But on one quiet night, everything changed. An operator named Daniel leaned back in his chair, sipping recycled coffee. His console flickered once, then again. Numbers rolled across the screen, two ordered to be random. The signal was faint but constant. He frowned and adjusted the filters. Soon a pattern emerged. It was not noise. It was not static. It was a message. The sound was like a whisper, low and broken, not in any language Daniel knew. His heart raced as he ran the data through translation programs. The machine struggled, breaking words apart, reshaping them into fragments of meaning. And then, like a door opening, it gave him a phrase. "Warning, system at risk, weapon will wake." Daniel froze. His fingers trembled over the console. He called for his supervisor. Soon the entire room was filled with eyes staring at the strange message. They tried again and again, feeding it into different systems. The translation grew clearer. The devourer stirs. No fleet can stand, run while you can. The officers in the post whispered nervously. Some laughed uneasily, claiming it was an old alien prank. Others felt a weight pressing down on them. Daniel did not laugh. He could feel the seriousness of the words. He had studied enough alien codes to know this was not a joke. The message was layered, designed to be picked up by a species that understood advanced mathematics. It was never meant for humans, yet somehow they had heard it. The message carried coordinates, a dark system far beyond human maps. There were strange symbols too, warnings. Etched into the numbers, they spoke of dead fleets, shattered stars, and a hunger that consumed all. Daniel stared at them and felt as if the stars themselves had gone cold. The signal did not stop. It repeated over and over, like a desperate cry in the void. Daniel sent the report to Earth Command within hours. The quiet listening post became the center of the most important discovery humanity had ever made. Generals, admirals, and scientists crowded into the secure network, watching the data unfold. The admirals debated. Some said ignore it. Humanity was still young in the stars. They had only a few colonies, a growing but fragile fleet. To march into unknown danger would be madness. But others argued that warnings like these could not be ignored. If there was truly a weapon, something that destroyed entire fleets, Earth could not risk waiting until it reached them. The president of Earth's Union was woken in the middle of the night. She listened to the broken alien voice and felt the same chill Daniel had felt. The decision was made. They would not hide. They would not wait. Humanity would send ships to investigate. Even if the message was never meant for them, they would answer it. Across the system, warships stirred from their docks. Frigates, carriers, and heavy cruisers fueled and armed. Crews were called back from leave. Young men and women hugged their families, unsure if they would return. The fleet that rose from Earth's orbit was small compared to alien powers, but it was determined. Daniel watched the news from the listening post. He felt strange pride and fear mixing inside him. A simple operator had been the first to hear the warning. Now humanity was moving because of it. The coordinates glowed on the star maps, leading to a place no human had ever dared travel. The signal still whispered in the dark, the same desperate words repeating like an echo from ghosts. Run while you can. No fleet can stand. But the humans were not running. They were moving forward. Engines lit up the black, ships stretching into formation, and for the first time in history, humanity stepped toward a destiny they were never meant to face. The stars ahead seemed colder than before, but within every human heart burned the same fire. If the galaxy thought they would hide, it was wrong. They would go where others had fallen. They would face what others feared. The message was clear. This was not their fight, but they had made it their fight. And in the silent dark, far beyond human eyes, something stirred, waiting, watching. Its slumber had been broken, its hunger turning. The devourer was waking. The Terran fleet crossed into unknown space. Engines, burning steady as they followed the coordinates from the strange signal. The stars here looked different, dimmer, as if the very light feared to shine. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the flagship Resolute, his eyes fixed on the void ahead. He had seen battles before, but nothing prepared him for what waited in this forgotten system. The first sign was wreckage. Massive hulls drifted lifeless, alien ships of designs never seen before. Some looked like long silver spires cracked open like broken bones. Others were colossal disks torn in half. Fires still flickered weakly inside their shattered cores, as if refusing to die. The crew fell silent, staring at the remains of fleets greater than their own. "Report," Hayes said calmly, though his voice carried weight. Sensors confirmed what the eye already knew. These ships had been destroyed recently, maybe weeks ago. The wounds on their hulls were not from missiles or lasers. They were melted, twisted as though space itself had clawed them apart. The fleet moved carefully, weaving between the floating graveyard. A damaged alien cruiser sent a faint beacon. Hayes ordered a shuttle. A small team boarded the wreck. Inside, the smell of burned metal and death filled the air. Survivors lay, scattered strange reptilian beings with scaled faces and tired eyes. They were broken, wounded and half-mad with fear. One survivor clutched the human officer's arm and whispered through a broken translator, "Leave. Leave this place. It is awake now. Nothing can stand against it." The alien coughed blood and fell silent. His claws scratched weakly at the deck before his hand dropped. The message was clear enough. The humans brought the survivors aboard. Their medics worked quickly, but the words those beings spoke chilled the hearts of everyone who listened. They called it the Devourer. They said it was not an enemy fleet, not an empire, but a weapon, a machine built to consume energy, to feed on life itself. No defense could stop it. No star system could survive once it arrived. On the bridge of the Resolute, the officers debated. Some urged retreat. If this was true, humanity had no chance. They were still newcomers to the stars. Others said they could not turn back, not now. They had already seen too much. Hayes stood silent for a moment, then gave his order. "We go deeper. We must see with our own eyes." The fleet pressed forward, and soon they reached the coordinates from the signal. The system was dark, its star dimmed to a red ember. Planets drifted in silence. One shattered into pieces as if crushed by some invisible hand. And then they saw it. A shape the size of a moon, black as shadow with a surface that seemed to shift like liquid metal. It hung in orbit like a predator waiting to strike. Every human felt their breath catch. It was not a ship, not in any way. They understood. It was alive, or something close to it. The Devourer turned slowly as if sensing their arrival. The ship's instruments crackled, power drains sweeping across the fleet. Lights flickered and alarms rang. Hayes clenched his fist. "Shields up, all power to engines, keep formation." The first wave came without warning. A burst of energy lanced out, not like a weapon but like a hunger. It struck a human destroyer, ripping its core apart. In a flash, the ship was gone, its energy swallowed whole. The crew gasped but held their ground. The Devourer did not chase. It did not roar or threaten. It simply waited as if daring them to resist. Hayes knew the truth in that moment. This was not a battle in the old sense. This was survival against something far beyond reason. Still, he gave the order. Fire. Missiles streaked through the void. Lasers cut across the dark. Explosions lit up the Devourer's surface, but the damage healed almost instantly, like wounds closing on flesh. The humans fired again and again, but it was like throwing stones into an ocean. The Devourer turned again, feeding on their attacks. "Growing stronger, Admiral. We can't win this," one officer whispered. Hayes did not reply. He knew she was right, yet even in fear, there was something else burning in the humans. They did not retreat. Not yet. Instead, they studied, recording every move, every reaction, searching for a weakness. Hours passed. The Devourer finally drifted away, sliding into the shadow of the shattered planet. The humans were left shaken but alive. For now, Hayes knew it was not mercy. The machine simply did not see them as a threat. That truth cut deeper than fear. The survivors they had rescued spoke again. Others ran. Others begged. None survived. You humans should flee too. Hayes looked at his officers, at the faces of men and women who had already seen death. No, he said quietly. If no one else will stand, then we must. Even if we are small, even if we are weak, we will not run. And so the Terran fleet turned back, carrying proof of what they had seen. They would tell the galaxy. They would bring warning to the Council. But Hayes knew what the response would be. Aliens would laugh, call them reckless, foolish, yet deep inside, he felt something else. Humanity would not back down. And one day soon, they would return, not to observe but to fight. As the fleet left the dead system, the Devourer stirred once more. Its black surface rippled. Eyes that were not eyes seemed to. It had noticed them after all, and though it let them leave, it would not forget. The humans had looked into its darkness and refused to kneel. That alone made them dangerous. The Terran fleet returned home scarred, ships bearing the marks of battle, crews carrying the weight of what they had seen. The report spread quickly across Earth Command, stirring fear and disbelief. Within days, the Galactic Council summoned an emergency session. Humanity had only recently earned a seat among them, a seat most of the elder races believed they did not deserve. Now humans stood before them with warnings of a threat greater than anything in living memory. The council chamber was vast, a dome of light suspended above a star field. Representatives of dozens of species sat in tiers, their faces ranging from scales to feathers to metallic masks. Each elder race spoke in hushed tones as the humans entered. Admiral Hayes and President Rivera leading the delegation, the humans carried data cores filled with images of wrecked fleets and recordings of the alien survivors who had begged them to flee. When Hayes finished his report, silence hung for only a moment before it broke into laughter. The voice of a counselor from the Gel Empire boomed across the chamber. Young humans, always so dramatic, you hear a ghost in the void and claim, the end of all things, you do not yet understand the galaxy. Another elder, tall and luminous, shook his head. The Devourer is legend, a child's tale whispered to frightened soldiers. You mistake superstition for truth. The humans stood firm. Rivera ordered the holoscreens activated. The chamber filled with images of broken warships, thousands of alien dead drifting in space. The survivors' voices echoed again. It is awake, it feeds, nothing can stop it. Yet still, the counselors laughed. Some even mocked the humans openly. Perhaps you destroyed these fleets yourselves and now seek glory, one hissed. Perhaps you hope to frighten us so we grant you more power. Hayes clenched his jaw, his fists hidden behind his back. He wanted to shout, to remind them of the destroyer that had been swallowed whole in a single breath. But Rivera raised her hand, calm and steady. We did not come for your praise. We came to warn you. What you choose to do with this warning will decide your fate. Only one figure did not laugh. An ancient being known as Elder Tivar sat in the highest seat. His kind had lived longer than almost any other race. His deep eyes did not shine with amusement but with memory. I have heard this name before, Tivar whispered. His voice silenced the chamber. When I was young, our archives spoke of a weapon left by those who ruled before us. A machine that feeds on the light of stars. We called it the Devourer, and it was said that when it stirred again, nothing in the galaxy would be spared. The laughter died, but not the arrogance. One counselor waved a jeweled hand. If such a weapon exists, why should we fear? The elder fleets are vast. Our technology is unmatched. We have stood for thousands of years. Humans have not even stood for one. His words drew nods. The council turned cold again, their pride stronger than their caution. Rivera knew then that no help would come. The council was trapped in its own belief of invincibility. Hayes leaned close and muttered, They won't move until the fire is at their own doorstep, she nodded. Then we must move without them. The humans withdrew, their footsteps echoing in the grand chamber. Behind them, the voices of the counselors rose again, dismissing them, mocking them. In the eyes of the galaxy's rulers, humanity was still a child shouting at shadows. But in the hearts of the human delegation, the fire only grew hotter. They had looked into the darkness and knew it was real. On the journey back to Earth, Hayes gathered his officers. The Council will not stand with us. They will wait until it is too late. That means it falls to us alone. We cannot wait for allies who refuse to see. We must prepare. His words spread across the fleet. Carriers and frigates filled with determination. Young captains wrote letters home, telling families they would fight for more than just Earth. They would fight for every world too blind to save itself. Daniel, the operator who had first heard the signal, watched the news feeds with a heavy heart. He saw aliens on the Council broadcasts mocking humans, calling them liars, calling them fools. Yet deep inside, he felt something else. A quiet pride. Humanity had been underestimated since the beginning, and every time they had risen higher than anyone expected. This would be no different. Back on Earth, shipyards flared with light. Orders spread across colonies. Factories roared to life. Soldiers trained harder. Engineers built faster. The words of Elder Tavar haunted every human leader. If the Devourer truly was the weapon of the ancients, then time was short. Humanity could not wait for the Council to wake from its arrogance. Above the blue curve of Earth, fleets gathered, not yet vast, not yet strong enough, but burning with resolve. They were laughed at in the chambers of the powerful, but the stars would remember differently. For the humans had heard the message not meant for them, and unlike the others, they had chosen to answer it. Far away in the dark system where the Devourer slept, the machine stirred once more. Energy rippled across its surface, sensing movement, sensing defiance. It had fed on empires before. It would feed again. Yet for the first time, something unexpected loomed in its path. Not a mighty elder fleet, but the fire of a young race that refused to bow. The shipyards of Earth had never worked like this before. Day and night, sparks flew as welders sealed new hulls, massive cranes, lifted engines the size of towers, and entire cities seemed to beat in rhythm with the building of warships. The Council had laughed at humanity, called them children, but that only fueled the fire. Humans had been mocked before on their own world in their own history, and each time they had risen, now they would rise again, not with words, but with steel and fire. Admiral Hayes walked across the dry dock of Luna Station. His boots echoed against the metal as he looked up at the massive dreadnought taking shape. It was called Defiance, a name chosen by the workers themselves. The hull stretched for kilometers, bristling with cannons, missile silos, and shield arrays. Hayes had commanded ships his whole life, but nothing like this. Humanity was not only building ships, they were building a future. President Rivera visited the shipyards as well. She stood before thousands of engineers, miners, and technicians who had volunteered from across the colonies. The Council may laugh, but we will not. Stop. Every rivet, every plate, every ship you build is not just for Earth, but for the galaxy that refuses to see the danger. We will be ready when the darkness comes. The crowd roared, a sound that carried across the station walls. Factories on Mars worked endlessly, rolling out frigates faster than ever. Small, fast, and deadly, they would swarm around enemy targets like hornets. Titan's shipyards specialized in carriers long and wide, each one a city in space, ready to unleash squadrons of fighters. Even small colonies joined in, sending resources, parts, even entire families of builders who wanted to be part of the effort. The designs of these ships were not like those of the elder races. Humans had studied their technology and learned, but they did not copy. Instead, they built for creativity, for adaptability. Their ships could switch tactics mid-battle, change weapon systems, or reroute power faster than alien vessels ever could. It was this flexibility that made them dangerous. Humanity's strength had always been its ability to improvise. Now that gift was built into every hull, the first test came sooner than expected. A patrol frigate near the edge of human space reported strange energy spikes. Hayes ordered a small fleet to investigate. When they arrived, they found an alien scouting party, ships from a race called the Valak. They had come not as allies, But as spies sent by the Council to confirm if humanity was truly building an armada, the human fleet did not fire. Instead, they let the Valek ships see everything. The growing lines of cruisers, the dreadnoughts under construction, the endless movement of fighters and bombers. Hayes knew the aliens would report back, and, when they did, the Council would not laugh so easily. Meanwhile, deep inside hidden facilities, scientists worked on new weapons. Plasma lances designed to pierce even the thickest shields, graviton mines that could drag ships into sudden traps, and railguns so powerful they could fire slugs across half a system. These were weapons of desperation, but also of genius. Humanity had no choice but to innovate faster than anyone before them. Daniel, the operator who had first heard the signal, was invited to watch the progress. He stood wide-eyed on a balcony overlooking the assembly of a massive supercarrier. He had never imagined his discovery would lead to this. He whispered to himself, "It was never meant for us, but we're making it ours." His words carried a strange power echoing the spirit of all humans who now worked with fire in their hearts. Still, fear lingered. News of the Devourer spread in whispers among the workers. Many had seen the recordings, the black shape in the void, the destroyer vanishing in a single breath. They knew what they were building towards, and they knew the cost. Some would not live to see victory, but still they built, because the alternative was worse. On the bridge of the half-completed Defiance, Hayes met with his captains. "We cannot wait for the Council. By the time they believe, it will be too late. The Devourer is awake, and it will come for us. When it does, we will meet it not with fear, but with fire." His words settled into the crew like steel. They were not fighting just for survival. They were fighting to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. Beyond the orbit of Neptune, the first completed fleets gathered. Carriers lined up beside cruisers, frigates darted between them like wolves, fighters filled the space in swarms. Humanity had never looked so powerful. Yet Hayes knew the truth. They were still not enough. Not yet. But each day they grew stronger, each shipyard adding more teeth to the bite of Earth. Far across the galaxy, the Council received reports from their spies. They no longer laughed. The images of humanity's growing fleet, the sheer determination, in their work made even the proudest elders uneasy. They had dismissed the Devourer as myth, but the humans believed, and belief was dangerous. The Devourer itself stirred, drifting through the shadows of the dead system. It did not know fear. It did not know hesitation, but something new pressed against its awareness. A sound. A rhythm. Not the cries of fleeing fleets, not the silence of surrender, but the steady drumbeat of hammers and engines. Humanity was coming, and for the first time in an age, the galaxy's great weapon would face prey that did not run. The coordinates from the signal pulled the Terran armada deeper into the dark. The fleets had grown, carriers, frigates, and dreadnoughts now moving in perfect formation. Yet every man and woman aboard knew they were heading toward something, older and hungrier than war itself. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the Defiance, the dreadnought finally complete. His eyes scanned the silent star system ahead. The map showed no trade lanes, no colonies, only a dying red sun and shattered planets circling it like broken teeth. As the ships crossed into the system, the sensors lit up with strange energy readings. A wave of static crawled across the fleets, instruments as if the void itself was whispering. Then, without warning, the star dimmed further. Its light stretched and bent, pulled as though something invisible was drinking from it. Hayes' stomach tightened. He had seen wrecks before, dead fleets and burned worlds. But this was different. This was the source. And then they saw it. At first it looked like a shadow, moving against the light, but shadows do not move like predators. The Devourer emerged from behind the broken planet. Its surface was black and shifting, alive with ripples like liquid metal. It was not a ship, not in any design known to humans or aliens. It was something beyond, built for only one purpose. It fed. The crew held their breath as the massive shape turned slowly toward them. Its surface pulsed, and the fleet's lights flickered. Power drains surged across the ships, backup systems kicking in to keep engines alive. Hayes barked orders. Shields up, weapons armed, hold formation. His voice was steady, but inside, his chest pounded. The Devourer had awakened. The first strike came like a silent scream. A beam of energy burst from the creature machine, not fire, not plasma, but raw hunger. It touched a frigate at the edge of the formation, and in seconds the ship dissolved, its core stripped of power, its hull crumbling as though decades passed in an instant. The crew's last transmission was a cry of defiance, before silence claimed them. Every officer on the Defiance turned to Hayes, waiting, hoping. His reply was simple: "We fight." The order echoed through the fleet. Missiles launched, railguns thundered. Fighters swarmed forward like angry sparks. The blackness of space lit up with human fire. For a moment it seemed they could wound the thing. Explosions rippled across its shifting surface, bright as newborn stars. But each wound healed, the surface closing as if nothing had touched it. The Devourer fed even on their attacks, turning destruction into strength. On the carrier Vanguard, Captain Silva clenched her teeth as her squadrons darted in. She knew their weapons were weak against it, but they flew anyway, weaving through bursts of draining energy. Fighters sacrificed themselves to strike closer, some vanishing mid-dive, others managing to deliver their payloads, but the result was the same. The Devourer consumed everything. Hours passed, and the battle raged. Human ships burned, but they did not run. Hayes watched the pattern closely. His mind searched for any weakness. He noticed something, a delay. After each feeding strike, there was a pause, small but real. The Devourer's hunger had rhythm, and rhythm could be exploited. "Mark the pauses," Hayes ordered. "Hit it when it hesitates." The fleet shifted tactics, holding fire until the machine struck, then unleashing everything in the small. And the space around them shook. The Devourer shuddered just barely, but it was enough to prove it could be forced to react. Still, the cost was brutal. The destroyer Iron Hand overloaded its guns and burned itself out. Another carrier sacrificed its shields to shield the dreadnought. The humans kept fighting, every ship buying time, every death a statement. They would not yield. From the med bay of the Resolute, Daniel watched the battle feeds. His hands shook as he saw ships vanish one by one. He remembered the words of the alien survivors: "Run while you can." But humanity was not running. They were rewriting the story with every blast. At last, the Devourer shifted, pulling away. From the fleet it drifted back into the shadow of the dead planet, as if bored or perhaps as if calculating. Hayes stood tall. "It didn't destroy us, not because it couldn't, but because it doesn't see us as worthy yet." His officers exchanged grim looks. The Devourer was not done. This had only been its awakening. Silence filled the system, broken only by the soft hum of damaged engines. The fleet floated battered but alive. Humanity had stared into the dark and had not broken. The Devourer had taken its first bite, but humanity still stood. Hayes sent the order across every channel. "Record everything, every movement, every strike, every detail. This knowledge will be our weapon." As the fleet turned away, limping toward safer ground, Hayes felt the weight of every lost life pressing on him. But beneath the sorrow burned resolve. The galaxy had ignored the warnings. The Council had laughed. Now humanity knew the truth. The enemy was awake, and it was coming. And when it came, they would be ready. Behind them in the broken system, the Devourer rippled again, its vast body glowing faintly as it drew in the last energy of the dying star. The sun flickered once, then collapsed into silence. The machine had fed, and now it hungered for more. Somewhere in the dark it had marked the humans not as prey to be ignored, but as prey worth hunting. The Terran fleet limped back from the shadow of the dead star, hulls scarred, crews exhausted, but spirits burning, hotter than ever. The Devourer had awakened, it had struck, it had fed, yet humanity had endured. That alone was victory enough to give Admiral Hayes and his commanders a single clear thought. This monster could bleed, and if it could bleed, it could be beaten. On Earth, the report sent shockwaves through every colony and shipyard. The Council dismissed them still, but among the workers and soldiers of humanity, the truth was iron. The Devourer was real, and if no one else would stand, humanity would. Scientists replayed every recording, studying the pauses, the strange rhythm of its Feeding, Hayes's order had been clear. Every detail is a weapon, and so humanity sharpened their memory into blades. Weeks later, the Armada returned to the Dark System. This time they did not come with hope of brute force, they came with cunning. Human history was filled with traps and ambushes, from forests and oceans to deserts and skies. Now they would bring those same lessons into the stars. Hayes and his strategists worked in silence, drawing maps of gravity wells, calculating orbits of shattered moons, planning how to chain a beast that devoured light itself. The plan was madness, yet it was human. Dreadnoughts would stand as bait, drawing the devourer's hunger. Meanwhile, stealth frigates would scatter across the system, laying graviton charges. These were weapons of desperation, black hole snares designed to drag anything into an invisible net. If it worked, the devourer would be trapped, even if only for moments. Moments were all humanity needed. When the fleet arrived, silence greeted them. The devourer was gone from the orbit where it had fed before, but Hayes knew it was there, watching, waiting. The Armada spread out carefully. Carriers launched fighters. Frigates cloaked themselves in the shadows of rocks. Every ship moved as if the stars themselves were listening. Then the darkness moved. The devourer emerged from the void, larger now, pulsing with the power of the sun it had consumed. Its surface rippled like black waves. Its presence pressed against every mind, a weight that whispered, surrender. Yet, the humans did not waver. Hayes's voice cut through the fear. Hold the line, bait it in, remember the plan. The devourer struck first, energy drained from the lead dreadnought Resolute. Lights flickered, alarms screamed. The ship shuddered, as if dying, but it held. Its guns roared defiantly. Every blast was not to win, but to keep the monster's eyes fixed on it. The sacrifice was written in their orders. The Resolute stood tall until its core finally burned out. A star exploding in miniature. The crew's last words rang across the comms. For Earth, for the galaxy. In that heartbeat of chaos, the stealth frigates moved. Small, unseen, like shadows within shadows. They planted the graviton charges across the system, each mine linked by a hidden net of energy, each one waiting for the moment to snap shut. Hayes gave the order, spring it. The void rippled, invisible chains wrapped around the devourer, space itself bent, pulling the monster into the snare. For the first time, the machine reacted in panic. It thrashed, its surface glowing with furious light. Its hunger lashed out, devouring 2 frigates instantly, but the trap held, black holes tugging at its vast body, pinning it in place. Now, Hayes roared. The Armada unleashed everything. Dreadnoughts poured plasma lances into its surface. Carriers launched wave after wave of bombers. Railguns tore through its rippling armor. The devourer shook, its form breaking and reforming under the storm. For a brief shining moment, humanity saw hope. The beast could be hurt, but hope came at a price. The charges began to collapse, black holes swallowing themselves. The snare was breaking. Hayes's officers looked at him with fear. It won't hold, sir. He nodded grimly. Then we buy more time. The carrier. Vanguard sacrificed itself, its captain steering it directly into the monster's path. The explosion lit the system, tearing chunks from the devourer's surface. Another cruiser followed, detonating its reactor at point-blank range. Each sacrifice tore a wound. Each wound slowed the monster further. The humans were bleeding at one ship at a time. In the medbay, Daniel watched the feeds, his hands pressed tight to the screen. He whispered the words he had once spoken when the message first came. It was never meant for us, but it's ours now. Around him, wounded soldiers lifted their heads, listening. They repeated his words. Voices weak but steady, and across the fleet that phrase spread. A chant, a vow. Humanity's defiance carried even in their dying breath. At last, the charges gave way. The trap collapsed. The devourer broke free. Its body rippled, furious. Its hunger lashed out, draining half a squadron in one sweep. But it was wounded. For the first time in eons, the monster bled energy into the void instead of feeding on it. Humanity had not won, not yet. But they had done the impossible. They had forced the devourer to retreat. As it slid back into the shadows, the Armada gathered its remains, battered, broken, but alive. Hayes stood on the bridge, his voice low but unshaken. "We proved it can be hurt. That is enough. Next time, we end it." His words traveled across the comms, across every ship, across every survivor. A promise forged in blood and fire. Far away, in the dark between stars, the Devourer drifted. It had fed on countless civilizations, broken empires, consumed suns, but never before had prey wounded it. Never before had prey set traps and dared to fight. In its alien mind, something stirred, not fear but recognition. Humanity was not prey, humanity was challenge. The Terran Armada floated in silence, scarred and bleeding, yet alive. The trap had worked. The Devourer had been wounded. For the first time in its endless hunger, the galaxy's great predator had faltered. That single truth burned in every human heart. But Admiral Hayes knew the cost. The fleet was half its strength. Carriers and cruisers reduced to glowing wrecks drifting in the void. Families across the colonies would mourn, yet their sacrifice had given humanity one gift: proof. The monster could be hurt. Back on Earth, the news spread like fire. The Council still sneered, claiming the humans had faked their victories, but the colonies knew better. The recordings of ships vanishing, of captains shouting their last words before detonating. Their reactors played on every screen. Children whispered those names like prayers. The galaxy had laughed before, but now it listened in uneasy silence. Hayes gathered his captains in the war room of the Defiance. The room was dim. Hollow maps of the dead system. Glowing in the air, his voice was steady, though his eyes carried the weight of 1,000 lost lives. The Devourer will not stop. It will return, and when it does, it will come for Earth. It will come for every world. There is no running, no hiding. This will end only when one of us falls. The room was silent. Then Captain Silva spoke, her voice sharp. "We can't fight it head on. Our weapons weaken it, but they don't destroy it. We need something bigger, something final." The suggestion hung heavy. Everyone knew what she meant. A full-core overload, a sacrifice, not of one cruiser, but of the greatest ship humanity had ever built, the Defiance. Hayes nodded slowly. A flagship's core detonated at the right moment could tear it apart. It would take all of us to hold it long enough, but if it works... He left the words unfinished. The captains exchanged grim glances. They all knew what it meant. A final gambit, a suicide strike, humanity's last card. The weeks that followed were filled with furious preparation. Engineers reconfigured the Defiance's core, layering it with warheads and experimental energy converters. The ship itself became a bomb. Fighters were rebuilt, frigates repaired, every vessel made ready for one last battle. Crews wrote farewell letters. Some cried, some laughed, some simply worked in silence, knowing time was short. When the Devourer returned, it was not subtle. The stars trembled, the void shivered. The black shape slid into the system like a tide of death. It was larger than before, its surface glowing, faintly with stolen light. The Armada waited, shields already humming, engines primed. Hayes stood on the bridge of the Defiance, his face calm as the storm approached. The first clash was brutal. The Devourer's hunger lashed out, swallowing. 2 frigates in an instant. Fighters darted forward, unleashing missiles that barely scarred its hide. Cruisers poured fire until their barrels melted. One by one, they were consumed. But each second they bought pushed the monster closer to the trap, closer to the heart of the fleet. "Bring it in," Hayes ordered. The Defiance surged forward, its weapons blazing. The Devourer turned toward it, sensing the greatest feast. Energy drained from the dreadnought's shields. But the ship held. Carriers launched wave after wave, not to win, but to keep the beast's focus locked. Daniel sat at a console deep inside the ship, his hands shaking as he relayed sensor data. He whispered the words he had carried since the beginning. "It was never meant for us, but it's ours now." Around him, the crew repeated it like a vow. Fear turned to steel. The Devourer lashed again, tearing holes in the fleet. But the humans refused to break. The Defiance pressed closer. its core glowing brighter as the overload sequence prepared. Hayes's officers looked to him, waiting for the command that would end them all. His voice was steady. For Earth, for every world, for tomorrow. The order was given, the core overload began. Alarms screamed, the decks shook. Every crew member knew the end was near. Fighters dove in one last time, shielding the Defiance with their own lives. Frigates rammed the monster, detonating their reactors to slow its thrashing. Humanity poured its very soul into that moment. The Defiance reached the heart of the beast, its hull cracking, flames spilling into the void. Hayes stood tall, his hand steady on the command console. He did not look afraid. He looked defiant. "Now," he whispered. The core erupted. The explosion was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. A star born in miniature, blinding light flooding the system. The shockwave tore through the Devourer's surface, ripping it apart from within. Pieces of liquid black metal flew outward, dissolving as they scattered. For the first time, the Predator screamed. Not in sound, but in the shuddering collapse of its form. When the light faded, silence returned. The humans who survived stared. In awe, the Defiance was gone. Hayes and his crew turned to stardust, but the Devourer was broken, crippled, its vast form collapsing into the void. Humanity had struck the impossible blow. On the remaining ships, survivors wept and cheered, their voices carried across the comms. For Earth, for Hayes, for the fallen. They had not won fully, not yet, but they had done what no other race had dared. They had faced the nightmare, and scarred it. Humanity's final gambit had worked. Far beyond, in the council chambers, the news reached the elder races. This time there was no laughter, no mockery. The humans had done the unthinkable, and the galaxy trembled at the thought. The light of the explosion faded, leaving silence. The great dreadnought, Defiance, was gone. Admiral Hayes and his crew had given everything, and yet, in that sacrifice, the galaxy's oldest terror had been broken. The Devourer drifted, its vast body shattered, fragments of black metal dissolving into the void. For the first time in countless ages, it was not feeding, it was dying. Across the battered Terran, Armada cheers and sobs filled the comms. Survivors clung to life on half-broken ships, some without shields, some without weapons, but they were alive, and more importantly, they had won. On the carrier Vanguard, the Seku, Captain Silva stood among her crew, her voice rough. "Remember their names, remember Hayes, remember the Defiance. They gave us this victory, and we will carry it forward." The crews answered her in unison, their voices shaking the comms. For Earth, for Hayes, for the fallen. The Devourer's remains still pulsed faintly, a reminder that the monster was not entirely gone. Its core lingered, dark and silent. But its hunger had been broken, its endless feast interrupted. The surviving scientists whispered that it would take centuries, maybe longer. Before it could rise again, humanity had bought time, not only for themselves but for the entire galaxy. Back on Earth, news of the battle spread faster than light. Colonies lit up with messages. Children shouted Hayes's name. In the streets, families of the fallen wept with pride. Factories stopped work for one day as every siren wailed in honor of the dead. The council broadcast their official statement. For once, there was no laughter, no mockery. The galaxy's rulers bowed their heads. Elder Tavar's voice was heavy. "The humans have done what none of us believed possible." They heard the bow. Warning not meant for them, and they answered, "Now we owe them everything." But humanity did not ask for praise. Instead, they sent their own message, carried by satellites, relays, and every ship that could broadcast. It spread across the stars. It was short, simple, and spoken in 100 languages, yet it always ended the same. "If danger comes again, humanity will rise." That message echoed louder than the alien warning that had begun it all. It was no longer a cry of fear, but a promise. Daniel, the operator who had first heard the strange signal so long ago, stood at the listening post once more. His hair was grayer now, his hands less steady. He remembered the night he had sipped bad coffee and caught a whisper never meant for human ears. He looked out at the stars, his chest heavy with pride. "We answered," he said softly, And we saved them all. His voice carried through the comms, replayed endlessly, his words becoming part of the message itself. The Armada limped home, ships scarred and broken but flying with banners raised. Crowds filled every port, waiting for the survivors. Soldiers stepped off ramps to thunderous cheers. Families wept and embraced. Humanity had never known such unity. From Earth to Mars to the smallest colony, they all understood the same truth. They had stood for the galaxy when no one else dared. In the council chambers, the aliens who had mocked them now sat silent. Some bowed in shame, others whispered, fearfully. The humans had risen from nothing, from a young race barely known to the saviors of all, and deep in their hearts the elders knew what this meant. If humanity could do this now, what would they become in centuries to come? The galaxy shifted that day. Power was no longer measured by age or tradition, but by courage, and humanity had shown more courage than all combined. Even the council, proud and ancient, passed a new decree. From that day, Earth would not be treated as a child of the stars, but as an equal, as a guardian. Yet even in triumph, humanity did not forget the cost. Memorials rose across Earth and its colonies, carved with the names of every ship and every crew that had given their lives. The largest was built in orbit above Earth, a shining monument where the Defiance once launched. It carried one message in bold letters: we answered the call, and in the dark where the Devourer's remains drifted, its broken core pulsed faintly. The silence of its hunger was temporary. One day it might awaken again. One day it might seek to feed once more. But if it did, the galaxy would not face it alone. They would remember the humans who had fought it first, who had scarred it, who had taught the galaxy that no enemy was unstoppable. The last broadcast of the Terran Armada played across the stars. It was Hayes' voice recovered from the wreckage of the Defiance, his final words before the core detonated. His voice was calm, strong, steady. If you hear this, know that humanity stood. We were told to run. We were told to hide. But we chose to fight. If the dark rises again, remember us and rise too.